Ahoy! Very, I don't even know how to describe this. Tropical. I don't know. The whole sanctuary is a lot different this morning. We also have a lot of staplers and stuff, which I'm going to move, because I know that I'm going to hit my hand on that and it's going to hurt really bad. We are in Proverbs chapter 10 this morning, which I preached 3 weeks ago. I did Proverbs chapter 1, and then I preached the week after that. And originally I was going to do Proverbs chapter 10, and had it all done, ready to go. And the tornado came through that night, Saturday night, and, people lost their house, people lost their church, some people lost their lives in other places. And so I changed what I did, and I pulled an old sermon, old reliable, and I did that instead because that was, I thought anyway, a little bit more applicable, maybe. But I got another opportunity, so this is the sermon I was originally going to preach, but instead, because I was able to revise it a little bit and proofread my notes a little better. So we're in Proverbs chapter 1, and similar to when we're in Proverbs, I covered Proverbs 1. We're going to read a couple verses and then stop, and then read a couple verses and read a little bit more and stop, rather than just read the whole thing all the way through. So looking specifically at just the first 2 verses of Proverbs chapter 10. It says, "The Proverbs of Solomon. A wise son brings joy to his father, but grief to his mother. Ill-gotten treasures have no lasting value, but righteousness delivers from death." So these 2 verses sound very similar to 2 verses that we saw when we covered chapter 1. I know it's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, so, we've slept since then. But Proverbs chapter 1, verses 8 and 9 say, "Listen, my son, to your father's instructions. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. They are a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck." So, don't forsake your father's teaching, your mother's teaching. They're a garland or a chain. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 1 says, "A wise son brings joy to his father. A foolish son brings grief to his mother." So, if you take that garland of wisdom and you just rip it off, Solomon says in chapter 10, you're bringing grief to your mother. So think about that the next time you make a stupid decision in life, I guess. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 19. Says, "After ill-gotten gain, it takes away the life of those who get it." So if you go after ill-gotten gain, something you didn't really earn, you didn't really work for, it brings death, basically. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 2 says, "Ill-gotten treasures have no lasting value, but righteousness delivers from death." So keep in mind righteousness delivering from death, because it's going to really tie into a lot of the rest of the chapter. Now look at verse 3 of Proverbs chapter 10, and we're going to be here for a little bit. We're going to camp out on verse 3. "The Lord does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the craving of the wicked." That's a very bold. That's one of those Bible verses. You can take that and you can kind of twist it to mean anything you almost want it to mean, right? The Lord does not let the righteous go hungry. You have no food, you have no house, and you're not working to get either of those. But just say this prayer and manna will fall from heaven or something, right? But hopefully anyway, we know that it probably is not going to work that way. If it does work that way, let me know. I want it falling from heaven. That would be nice. But it's probably not going to work that way. But it's still a very bold statement that Solomon is making here. But again, go back to verse 2. "Ill-gotten treasures have no lasting value from death." So righteousness is the opposite of ill-gotten gain. And when we covered chapter 1, again, I know it's been a few weeks, but when we covered chapter 1, we also talked about ill-gotten treasure, like we saw, and we identified that the opposite of ill-gotten gain or ill-gotten treasure was wisdom. That righteousness is the opposite of ill-gotten gain in chapter 10. In context, righteousness is wisdom, or at least that's part of righteousness here in chapter 10. This same word appears in Proverbs chapter 8. Go ahead and flip there. You might not even have to flip a page, depending on how large the print of your Bible is. But Proverbs chapter 8, start in verse 12. This is a personification of wisdom that is speaking. It says, I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior and perverse speech. Counsel and sound judgment are mine. I have insight. I have power. By me my kings reign, decrees that are just. By me princes govern, and nobles, all who rule on earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. With me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. That word that's translated in chapter 8 as prosperity is the same word that in chapter 10 is translated as righteous or righteousness. So, again, righteousness is wisdom, because in chapter 8 it's, if wisdom could speak, this is what it would say. So righteousness is wisdom, or at least that's part of righteousness. Food, right? The Lord does not let the righteous go hungry. The wise do not go hungry. Chapter 8, verse 18, it says, with me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity, or righteousness or wisdom, however you want to say it. So you have food and you have wealth, basically, that are attributed to people who possess wisdom. Still very bold statements, right? Basically saying, right, the wise don't go hungry. How? How does that exactly work? Because, I've known some pretty wise people in my life. They're not too well off. They've been hungry at times. But look at verse 4 right after this. Verse 4, lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. So this makes sense and very, laziness brings poverty, right? Not everyone who's poor is lazy, obviously. But, if you don't ever work, you don't ever do anything, you never strive for anything in life, you're probably not going to be rolling in the dough. You're probably not going to have a lot of money. You're probably not going to have a lot of food. But, right, if you're a hard worker, again, not always, but generally, right, you're going to be okay in life, right? I mean, this isn't even necessarily some great spiritual truth. I mean, we just intuitively understand this, because this is just how the world works. The wise don't go hungry, right? Lazy hands make for poverty. Diligent hands bring wealth. Hard work is certainly the opposite of ill-gotten treasure, right? Ill-gotten gain, I didn't work for it. I just took it. Hard work is getting what or working for what I make. And so if wisdom is the opposite of ill-gotten treasure, then in part, wisdom is hard work. Being wise includes working hard. And again, this makes sense, right? And keep in mind, these are all general statements, right? There's a reason why in verse 1 it says the Proverbs of Solomon and not the word of the Lord. This is not something that you can just blanket apply to like any situation in life. The righteous aren't going to be hungry, right? These are general sayings. That's what a proverb is, right? It's general sayings of wisdom that are not necessarily universal for every single situation. We still have to address the fact, though, I mean, these are pretty bold statements that are being made. And so I took a few quotes from, different commentaries, different, websites, whatever. They're not very academic or technical, so you don't have to worry about that. Temporal or not permanent promises. This is not to be understood simply and universally. It is sometimes less evil for men to be killed with famine than to survive and to which are coming upon them in the land which they live. So yeah, I mean, sometimes, the more gracious thing, I guess, to do would be for God to let you die than, to suffer. Grandma, has cancer, and, she's just suffering. She doesn't have a lot of quality of life, and she dies, and, if the person is really faithful, they'll often say, well, that was a blessing, because we didn't want to see her suffer anymore, even though death is a painful thing. Another quote, it says, this will preserve them from famine, God will preserve them from famine according to his promises. And then he references Psalm 34 verse 10 as one of those promises. Psalm 34 verse 10 says, the lions may grow weak and hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Again, that's a very bold statement. And that's a verse that you can almost kind of mean to say whatever you want it to mean, right? Oh, those who seek the Lord lack no good thing, right? So I'm seeking the Lord. Where's my Lamborghini? I've been waiting on that one for like a decade now. This is a quote on Psalm 34:10. It says, right, God is able to supply every need, and if anything is withheld, it's always certain that it is not because God could not give it, but because he sees some good reason why it should not be given. That real good, what we need most, what will most benefit us, will be given to us. And universally, it may be said of all the children of God, that everything in this world and the next will be given that is really for their good. And I agree with that. So, right, you have these very, again, bold statements, chapter 8, verse 18, right, with me, with wisdom, riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. Chapter 10, verse 3, the Lord does not let the righteous go hungry. And we understand, right, there's sort of two planes of understanding going on here. There's the very literal, physical understanding, and we see that in verse 4. How do the righteous or the wise not go hungry? Well, lazy hands made for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth, right? That's a very physical understanding, right? You work hard, you get money, you get food, you survive, right? There's also sort of a moralistic or a more spiritual understanding as well. And this concept of these two planes of understanding kind of carries through really probably all of Proverbs, but specifically the rest of chapter 10. There's the more moral understanding of, okay, well, first of all, these are general principles, like we said. I mean, this isn't something that you can just quote to somebody and have ribeye steak fall from the heavens. And second, I mean, it's not just anything you want. It's all what is good for you, right? And so getting back to verse 3, right? The Lord does not let the wise or the righteous go hungry. He thwarts the cravings of the wicked, right? Well, the wicked, or as verse 4 would say, right, the lazy, right, they cannot rest in any real God is going to bless them, right? I mean, obviously, God makes it rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. I mean, we get that, but they can't really claim, any promise of God is like, oh, God's going to bless me, right? It doesn't really work that way, right? You can't go open up, I don't know. Let me rephrase that if I say something that's going to get me in trouble. You can't go out and kill someone and then just expect, oh, well, I murdered a man and, took his credit card and now I'm a millionaire. So obviously God is blessing me, right? I mean, it doesn't work. He cannot rest in any real lasting hope that God is going to bless them. But the righteous, the wise, the hardworking, they're said to be wealthy. They're said to never go hungry. But even in the absence of wealth or food, the wise can rest in the hope that God has a reasoning for that. And we're going to see that more as we move on. So look at verses, rereading verse 4 and then down through verse 16 of chapter 10. Once again, diligent hands bring wealth. He who gathers crops in summer is a prudent son. He who sleeps during harvest is a disgraceful son. Blessings crown the head of the righteous, but violence overwhelms the mouth of the wicked. The name of the righteous is used in blessings, but the name of the wicked will rot. The wise in heart accept commands, but a chattering fool comes to ruin. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. Whoever winks maliciously causes grief, and a chattering fool comes to ruin. I got confused because that phrase is in there twice. Of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers all wrongs. Wisdom is found in the lips of the discerning, but a rod is in for the back of one who has no sense. The wise store up knowledge, but the mouth of a fool invites ruin. The wealthy is their fortified city, but poverty is the ruin of the poor. The wages of the righteous is life, but the earnings of the wicked are sin and death. So, we already mentioned how, generally speaking, the hardworking don't go hungry. That's sort of a very physical, material, under. So let's look at some unwise actions, right? The opposite of the righteous that aren't going hungry, the opposite of wisdom. And we're not going to go through like every single example here because we could be here for hours. Just a few. Verse 5, second half. He who sleeps during harvest is a disgraceful son. Again, this is very physical. We can get behind this, right? Some of y'all are farmer boys. Man, I'm not a farmer boy at all. Don't ask me to plant your crops. I have no idea what to do. You're going to starve to death, right? I would be the foolish man that starves to death, unlike the righteous man that, does not go hungry, because I don't know what to do. But a lot of y'all, it's harvesting season, and so, you're up from the, sunrise to sunset, and trying to get that crop in, I spent some time in the Panhandle of Texas. It's all cotton and cows. And so when cotton came in, church attendance was down in the fields, right? But after cotton season, right, church attendance went like way up, right? Because everyone, I guess, felt like they had to make up for lost time or something. But we understand this. We understand, right? He who sleeps during harvest is a disgraceful son, right? In the same way, right, lazy hands they make for poverty, right? If you sleep during the time you're supposed to harvest, right, you ain't going to have no food. You ain't going to have no money, right? I mean, this is a very simple material plane of understanding. We can wrap our minds around this, right? And think about this. I mean, this ties back to verse 3 of not only the righteous not going hungry, but God thwarting the craving of the wicked, right? Think about it. If God is ultimately the one who brings crops, which he is, why would God just magically produce wheat or cotton or whatever on a farm where the workers slept all season? Right? I mean, that would not be, I'm not going to say that would be like outside of the character of God, but it would be very unusual, for God to reward laziness and to only do it for that purpose, right? I mean, that would be outside of the character of God. So I mean, even on the spiritual plane of understanding, we can also wrap our minds around this. Verse 6, second half. Violence overwhelms the mouth of the wicked, right? Verse 2, it says, righteousness delivers from death. Right? Well, if righteousness is wisdom, then to be unwise, to be unrighteous brings death, right? Death upon yourself. Again, I mean, these are general statements, right? Sometimes violent people survive. Sometimes violent people even thrive. Unfortunately, right, I mean, the people that are often, most violent or, most unjust are the ones financially the most well off, which is a very unfortunate reality that is not unique to our country. This is the way the world has been forever, unfortunately. But these are sort of general principles once again, right? Right? Those who violence overwhelms their mouths, right? They generally do not live blessed lives, right? Because the first half of verse 6 says, blessing crowns the head of the righteous, but violence overwhelms the mouth of the wicked. Well, if you're, overwhelmed, overcome with violence, yeah, you're not going to live a very blessed life, think about like any mobster or mafia movie ever, we stole money from Al Capone, but now he's coming to get us. And now we have to sleep with one eye open because we never know when Capone's gang is going to come up and shoot us, right? You're never actually going to, you might be wealthy, but you're not going to be, able to sleep at night. You're not sleep with one eye open, always looking, watching behind your back because it's ill-gotten gain. And because of that, you're not going to be able to actually enjoy it. Look at verse 11, second half. The mouth of the wicked conceals violence, right? And again, the violent sometimes prosper in life, right? Unfortunately. That is the reality. But going back to verse 3, I think something fell back there. I don't know what it was. But anyway, going back to verse 3 of chapter 10. The violent cannot lay claim to verse 3, just because, sort of hit on that point, just because, you're violent, you're overwhelmed with violence, yours, verse 11 puts it right, your mouth is concealing violence, right? Just because you're well off and just because you're successful, it doesn't mean you can claim verse 3 and say, the Lord didn't let me go hungry, right? I'm righteous because the Lord didn't let me go hungry, right? It doesn't work that way, and we understand that. At the same time, right? Oh, what fell was the water bottle. That's what it was. Okay. Sorry, that was very distracting for me, and I'm assuming it was for you as well. In the same way, the righteous cannot claim that verse 3 is wrong just because the violent sometimes succeed in life. Just because you look around you and you say, hey, that guy, he's a jerk. That guy's violent. He's overcome. He's overwhelmed with violence. He conceals violence. And he's doing well off. And I'm over here starving to death. Where's my ribeye steak? God says the Lord does not let the righteous go hungry. And I'm righteous and I'm going hungry. And this guy's not righteous. He's not wise. He's not hardworking. He's full of violence. And he's doing, well off, right? The righteous can't claim it isn't true. In the same way that the unrighteous can't claim that verse 3 is true for them, applicable to them just because they're doing well off. Last thing in this section, look at verse 16, second half. The earnings of the wicked are sin and death, right? Violence, unwise action, sin and death. Maybe not an action, but maybe the result of unwise actions. And again, go back up to verse 2, righteousness delivers from death. Now in 10:16, the wages of the righteous is life, right? So, sort of a physical, material understanding here. You have verse 3, going hungry, which is followed up by verse 4. Okay, we understand that. But righteousness delivering from death, there's also a moralistic sense at play as well here. And that, right, okay, righteousness delivers from death. The wages of righteousness is life, as verse 16 puts it. There is sort of an aspect of just physical life, living, breathing, eating, that kind of thing. But also, it also means life in the sense of what you were made to do, right? True life, right? Your created purpose and your created intention, or your created mission in this world. And that comes from obedience to God. And that's exactly what we're going to see and verse 17 through the end of the chapter. So looking at verse 17, whoever heeds discipline, ignores correction, leads others astray. Whoever conceals hatred with lying lips and spreads slander is a fool. Sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver, but the heart of the wicked is of little value. The lips of the righteous nourish many, but fools die for lack of sense. The blessing of the Lord brings wealth without painful toil for it. A fool finds pleasure in wicked schemes, but a person of understanding delights in wisdom. What the wicked dread will overtake them. What the righteous desire will be granted. When the storm has swept by, the wicked are gone, but the righteous stand firm forever. As vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so the sluggards to those who send them. The fear of the Lord adds length to life, but the years of the wicked are cut short. The prospect of righteous is joy, but the hopes of the wicked come to nothing. The way of the Lord is a refuge for the blameless, but it is the ruin of those who do evil. The righteous will never be uprooted, but the wicked will not remain in the land. From the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom, but a perverse tongue will be silenced. The lips of the righteous know what finds favor, but the mouth of the wicked only what is perverse. So, we had some examples in 4 through 16 of unwise, unrighteous, some righteous living. And again, keep in mind, right, verse 16, the wages of the righteous is life. And we said, okay, there's sort of a literal, physical, material sense to that, right? You work hard, you eat. You're not overcome with violence. You're going to live a good life because you're not going to be scared so much, you follow God. Generally, life's going to go, your way. But there's also this sort of moralistic understanding true life, right? Living your life's purpose, the reason you were created. So some examples of this. Verse 17. Whoever heeds discipline shows the way to life. All right, so already, connecting back to this idea of true life. So heeding discipline, that's an example. Verse 19. The prudent hold their tongues. So holding your tongue, knowing when to speak and when not to speak, You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, right? You didn't think that was a biblical stone, and it's not, but, it kind of is a little bit. Verse 23, a person of understanding delights in wisdom. All right, so heeding discipline, holding your tongue, delighting in wisdom. Verse 25, the righteous stand firm forever, right? So standing firm, you're, just because something bad comes your way, right? You're not blown away, right? But you're standing firm in God. And then finally, 25. Oh, wait, that was 25. I think I skipped 23. Delighting in wisdom. Yeah, that was 23. Delighting in wisdom and delighting in these moral principles that you see here, right? And so, verse 22 says, the blessings of the Lord bring wealth without painful toil for it. So even within these verses that are more, the moralistic understanding of these blessings of God, there's still other verses that make some pretty bold statements like verse 3 does, right? Verse 3 is, let the righteous go hungry. And we said, okay, well, that's a bold statement. There's sort of this physical, material understanding and also this moralistic understanding. And then, we're covering these verses and it's all these, moral principles, right? The wise heed discipline, the wise hold their tongue, the wise delight in wisdom, the wise stand firm, right? But then even among that, you still have verses like, the blessings of the Lord brings wealth without painful toil for it. That's another verse you can just twist to almost say whatever you really wanted to say, right? To mean kind of whatever you want it to mean. So I have some more quotes, okay, from different people. One says, God's blessing can bring wealth without sorrow, which is unavoidable in a life of sin, right? Again, think about, gangster mafia movies. If you're constantly getting this ill-gotten gain, you might have wealth, but it's not going to be wealth without sorrow. It's not going to be wealth without painful toil, because you're always going to have to sleep with one eye open, be afraid you're going to get stabbed or something. Another quote, it says, riches without God's blessing bring only trouble with them. Again, same idea, right? By living a moral, God-honoring life, when we reap the physical, material blessings of this world, right, we can actually enjoy it because we didn't use evil means to achieve it, right? Some of, the most wealthy people in this world that got their wealth through evil means, they're miserable, right? That's, there's a reason why, people say money can't buy happiness. That's not just a saying that, sounds good on a rap song. There's a lot of truth to that, right? Just because you obtained wealth, if you did that in an unjust way, you're not going to be happy with your wealth, and you're not going to really be able to enjoy it. Right, the moralistic and then the physical or the material aspect of these verses, they actually blend rather nicely together, because if you're living out the moral sense, these moral principles, right, heeding discipline, holding your tongue, all these things, if you're living out the moral sense, then when you are blessed in a material sense, you will actually be able to enjoy those blessings. And so you see that both of these planes of understanding, actually, they're not working. Verse 24 is another verse that within these moral principles sounds is like something you can kind of twist to mean whatever you want. It says, what the wicked dread will overtake them, what the righteous desire will be granted, right? What the righteous desire will be granted. Give me my Lamborghini, right? But it doesn't really work that way. Again, first half, what the wicked dread will overtake them. Again, the whole, you got to sleep with one eye open thing, you get this ill-gotten treasure, this ill-gotten gain that we see in verse 2, and yeah, you're what you dread is going to overtake you. Somebody's going to kill you either for your money or, because, you killed my father, prepare to die, right? Revenge, breeding more revenge, kind of a thing. But that second half of verse 24, what the righteous desire will be granted, that, again, a very bold statement. If you're wise, right, 5, if you're living this godly moral life like we see in 17 through the end of the chapter, right, then your desires are going to look different than an unwise person, a lazy person, a violent person, a heed discipline or delight in wisdom, right? What you desire is actually going to look a lot different. And so, right, meshing, once again, the moralistic principles with the very physical, material sense of this proverb, your desires are going to be in line with God's desires, right? If you're following these moral principles, which, by the way, this isn't Shakespeare. This is the Word of God. So if you're following God's Word, then what you desire, what the righteous desire will be granted, it's not going to be, a Lamborghini. It's going to be what God desires, which we've already seen here in these verses. So again, these ideas, they mesh very well together. Verse 28, it says, the prospect of the righteous is joy, but the hopes of the wicked come to nothing. This is really the turning point in this whole chapter. Better late than never, I guess. I really like how the New King James translates this. It says, the hope of the righteous will be gladness, but the expectation of the wicked will perish, right? What the righteous desire, or what they hope for, is joy, right? The NIV, right? I guess kind of taking the New King James and the NIV, it would be righteous is joy. If you combining the best, or my favorite anyway, elements of both of those translations. The hope of the righteous is joy. Right, what the righteous desire, at least in part, is joy. And if you think about it, go back to verse 3, okay? The Lord does not let the righteous go hungry. Joy supersedes hunger, right? Verse 22, right? The blessings of the Lord brings wealth without painful toil for it. Joy supersedes wealth, right? The end goal of living a righteous life, a wise life, a hardworking, a moral life, is not to get rich and have ribeye steak every week, right? Joy supersedes all of that. Even when I ain't eating a ribeye steak, I'm eating a bologna sandwich, and even in, hey, I'm not a millionaire, I'm a dozenaire, right? I still have joy, which supersedes all of that, because joy is not dependent on how wealthy or how full I am, right? The end goal is that, right, in spite of my physical circumstances, I have joy. I have hope. And truly, again, the more physical, materialistic, wise, the hardworking, the moral people of life, they do stand a better chance of having food, having wealth, having money, right? Because, there is, again, the general principle, if you do things God's way, you're going to be rewarded for that. Not in every situation, but that is a general principle, right? There is a physical sense, a general principle to these chapters, but joy, right, is the hope. It's not, the end goal is always joy. It's not health or wealth or, ribeye steak. This is one last quote, and I'll close with this. It says, though at present, or right now, life is mixed with doubts and fears and disappointments, yet at last, at the new heaven and the new earth, it shall be accomplished and turned into enjoyment, right? This present world, we have doubts, we have fears, we have disappointments, we have tornadoes that blow through town, and you lose your home, you lose your church, and sometimes you lose your loved ones. But, right, at last it shall be accomplished and turned into enjoyment, right? What we hope for, in part, is joy, and that joy is not rooted in the present, it's rooted in the future and in the past of what Jesus Christ has done on the cross. And then in the future of, I'm living in a shanty here, but got that mansion on the hilltop in heaven. But all of this, this joy that supersedes wealth or supersedes food or supersedes any of this, right? That only comes with the relationship with Jesus Christ. Because you can live out these moral principles as just moral principles, then you're no better than the Pharisees. You're no better than the religious teachers of Jesus' day, right? Without faith in Jesus Christ, it doesn't really mean anything, right? And there's a whole bunch of Christian books that sort of take biblical ideas and sort of market them as like a self-help book, but that doesn't really get you anywhere, right? At that point, you really are only focusing on the physical, the materialistic understanding, right? But without that spiritual understanding, right, you're missing the point entirely. And so, right, if you don't have joy in your life, then either you don't have Jesus or you've lost sight of what joy is actually rooted in, right? It's rooted in the past, what Jesus Christ has accomplished for all of eternity, and in the future, which he will bring about. So we'll pray and we'll have an invitation. And if you don't have joy in your life, then I invite you to enter into a relationship with Jesus Christ and find that joy, right? I'm not promising you money or a ribeye steak, but I'm promising you the joy that supersedes all of those things. So we'll pray and we'll have an invitation. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this morning, for this opportunity for me to preach your word, for the opportunity for all of us to hear your word and to come under it and let it speak to us. Tell us what we need to change, how we need to live our lives. I just pray that if we don't have joy because we don't know you, that we would enter into a relationship with your Son, Jesus. And if we do have a relationship with your Son, that maybe we just need a reminder and we need to not in how much money we have or how good circumstances are, but what your Son has accomplished and in what your Son will bring about one day. I just pray for this invitation. Speak to us, God, and just give us a good rest of the day in your house worshiping you. We love you, and I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.